Hi everyone, let me tell you a bit about the Purple Cow workshops. What's a purple cow? Well, let me tell you why we call it the Purple Cow workshop. I pinched the idea, of course, like all these ideas. The idea is that if you're driving down a country road and you finally reach your relatives at the other end, and they say, "How was the drive?" And you go, "Well, I saw a lot of cows. I saw a lot of trees. I saw a lot of fences." But if they then say, "Did you see the purple cow?" I tell you, it could have been the only purple cow for 100 miles or 100 kilometers, and you would have seen it. So, how can a Christian person be like a purple cow in a world that is full of similar sounding ideas? People make comments about flourishing life based on psychology or on anthropology or on politics or on wealth creation or on yoga or on meditation or on just shove something in there, whatever's the latest one you've heard. They're all the same cow. They're all brown cows. How can you be the purple cow? That's what this whole suite of workshops is about. It's a marketing term, actually. But we're not marketing anything. We're trying to give something away. That makes it pretty suspicious from the very beginning. So we have to find a way to present ourselves and to present our message, to present the lifestyle and the challenges and the hope that we bring in a fresh way. So Purple Cow Workshops is one of the suite of Makes You Wonder workshops. And if you print them all out, they come out a bit like this. As you can see, it's quite a bit. And there's a number of them. I think it's about 8 on current score. And each of them is a small group study series for a church small group. And each of those 8 studies has about 5 or 6 separate, 1 week type or 1 night type studies. And they've been arranged in this way. We're using the material that is available on the Makes You Wonder exercises. They come from my story, your story, this story, and our story. Some come from the leaders' resources. But they've also been supplemented by the work of John Mallison in his ministry, the late, great, wonderful mentor of mine, who he and his descendants have given me permission to use some of his studies. In fact, I have done for many years. He was my mentor for 20 years. I just want to express my grateful admiration for him as teacher, mentor, evangelist, and leader. So let's go through the Purple Cow workshops one by one. You can just pick up the idea pretty quickly. I'm not going to go through them in details. So the first one is the Purple Cow, what makes you good news? What's a purple cow? Why should anyone notice your message? Then there's a really good exercise called the gifts that we bring. And I've often used this in church. That is, you can say to people, "Hey, everybody, I'm here to talk about evangelism. How do you feel about that?" And they all go, "What? What? Who brought this guy? No, what do you think about that?" And so they list all the things that everybody loves to list. Mostly they're negative things. Bible bashing, proselytizing, wouldn't do it to my dog, arrogant, all kinds of things. Preachy. But then occasionally someone will say, "Actually, it's good news. I'm glad somebody shared the gospel with me." And so on. And so you might get a small list, and then you say, "Okay, we know how not to do this. But if you could share your faith in the way that you feel would be right, what would it be like?" I tell you, they've got good ideas there too. Suddenly you start to list a whole lot of other things that have to do with authenticity, gentleness, respect, listening, taking your time, not imposing, taking opportunities as they arise, all kinds of lovely, respectful, positive, generous, hospitable themes, of which you have a list here which is not so good, and you list it here which looks like the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5. And then you say, well, you know how to do this, and you know how not to do this. Is this what's happening? In which case people often look at their shoes. So it's just a question of not telling you how to do anything, is it? It's a question of what confidence do you have? And are you afraid that if you share your faith with somebody, you'll do something bad? Because when Jesus was described as ministering to people, evangelizing them is the word that was used, it says the people loved it. They loved to hear it. And that's my experience. That's my experience. People say, gee, it's been great talking with you. I never thought I could have this sort of conversation, really enjoy it so much. It's been really valuable. And some people even say, Ian, you're wise, which of course I'm not. I'm just as big an idiot as they are. But the fact is that when I seek to share my gospel with them, I'm giving them the gift of time, gift of listening, the gift of community, the gift of perspective, and so on and so on. I'm giving lots of things that can never be taken back. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm just loving these people. And so they actually pick up how the gospel feels in the conversation. Notice, that's without even talking about the benefits of following Jesus. Without even talking about it, just the way I go about it, there are 7 great gifts. And it's a beautiful conversation to have because people suddenly realise, yeah, we know how to do this. There's some more exercises on hearing you, like what are some conversational entry points, and some quite profound, in fact. And then how to be a good listener. One of them, and how to just think with a bit of imagination. That's the purple cow. It's pretty basic, pretty introductory. That's the first one. The next one's the big idea, how to be a Holy Spirit movement. And a number of studies there on how the Holy Spirit can guide and lead, not just you as an individual, but the whole church. That's, then turn the page. How does the Bible teach evangelism? Now, quite often what we call evangelism is actually got nothing to do with how the Bible teaches it. Did you know that? Well, that's true. People seem to spend their time defending a doctrine of justification by faith. Well, is that the evangel? Well, nowhere in the New Testament does it say that's the evangel. The closest it goes is sometimes when the Apostle Paul is talking to people in the synagogue. There's not many people in synagogues now. Not many people with a church or religious background now. So that whole thing, close as it was, is now completely irrelevant to the task we have before us. Now, there are other ways to look at that, and that's just a whole series of studies of things you can do that are reasonably friendly and good and kind. And 4th study is Ace of Hearts, which talks about being an authentic community. Number 5 is Unguarded, how to be your Christian self in your own world, about masks and gifts and prayer and good self-image and so on. New Love and New Courage talks about giving each other encouragement. And there's actually, in a couple of these exercises and group studies, there's a prayer exercise that you can continue to do for each other. We need encouragement. We've got to keep going. We've got to keep going. And so it talks about your motivations and some small things, why we're still a Christian. You need to discover just how fantastic that is. Number 7 study is Hearts on Fire, and there's 6 studies there again. What can a whole church do to empower evangelism? That's because there's a very profound truth here. That the major part of the work of the evangelist is done by the congregation as a whole. It's not done by one person whom you might call an evangelist, and it's not done by everybody in general, because that's actually not what happens. It's done by everybody, acting together as one. That's what it is. So, and the last one is Good and Angry. This is a very important study, Good and Angry. Who did Jesus confront and why? These are all people that claim some kind of hold on religion, and he confronted them. He was angry with them, and he directed his anger constructively. Now, it's important to know this because sometimes people think just any kind of Christianity will do. And we witness today, various strains in Christianity where some people kind of act like this and some people act like this, and they hate the people who act like that. And they all kind of trade off insults to one another, even though they actually all do love Jesus. But they haven't actually figured out what kind of a life does Jesus want me to lead, and what kind of religion does he want me to practice and not practice. you'll remember, obviously, that Jesus opposed the Pharisees. Well, apart from calling someone a Pharisee because you feel like it, what is a Pharisee and why did Jesus oppose them? We need to do that Bible study. And there's a couple of reasons you should look at it. It wasn't just the Pharisees. He was also angry with the Sadducees. They were the people in charge. They ran the temple. He was dead against them. Remember that story about him throwing stuff out of the temple court, the court of the Gentiles, with a whip? Remember that? Well, that was a very controlled, directed anger at the Sadducees and the way they ran the show. But there are also people who are in charge of government who also claim to be Jewish, like Jesus. And they are the Herodians. And there's a lot of people, quote, being religious. And then they go on about their political life and their political role like Herodians. And Jesus was dead against them. Dead against them. In fact, they were dead against him and they arranged for him to be strung up. They were the Roman colonizers. And then there's a fifth group whom everybody else loved to hate and get angry at and put down. And Jesus conspicuously did not. He championed them. These were the Samaritans. On quite a number of occasions, not just the story of the Good Samaritan, but he would say how wonderful the Samaritans were as a role model. Now, everybody was scandalized by this cross-cultural, interracial affirmation. It's very important for us to understand just how important this particular stance was for Jesus, that he conspicuously confronted them by his championing of Samaritan people, both in terms of story and theology, but also in terms of personal conversations. Okay? So that's the Purple Cow workshops. They're very important ones. I hope you'll do them all. But you can see that they're set up so that anyone who's done the leadership curriculum of My Story, Your Story, This Story, and Our Story can very easily pass on these things and in the more sort of standard, 6-week Bible study curriculum and introduce them to small groups in the church very easily. You could introduce them, one per leaders meeting. Take 30 to 40 minutes with each one and just to take your leaders through a group, and in the course of 6 months or so, or however often you meet, you've taken them through quite a significant number of studies that are really helpful. And the titles are all meant to be catchy and very felt, very impactful. So add these to your resources of Makes You Wonder, not just the exercises or the material you could use in a sermon. Feel free to develop sermons out of all of this and send it to me on the blog site or to my email, idtr@westnet.com.au. I'm really keen to hear what your experiences are. I want your feedback. If you're using butcher's paper or a whiteboard to record answers, I'd love you to photograph that on your phone and send it to me at that email address. I really want us to influence each other and build each other up in this. It's a big culture change. You've really got to stick with it. So whatever means and strategies you can find, let me know. Use them, try them, fail a few times, win a few, and we've all taken some steps forward. Thanks very much for your attention. I'm going home.